Good morning. I want to welcome everyone to the North Carolina Climate Change Interagency Council. I'm Sharon Martin with Public Affairs at DEQ. Just a reminder, we have a full house here, so there are exits in the event of an emergency on either side of the room. The restrooms are also located just across the atrium outside. Also a reminder, there are video cameras and microphones in the room because we are live streaming this meeting, so welcome to those of you joining us remotely. We have a full agenda, so we'd like to get started. At this time, I'd like to introduce the Council Chair and the Secretary of the Department of Environmental Quality, Michael S. Regan.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, and thank you all for attending the Governor's Climate Change Interagency Council inaugural meeting. As Dr. King said, we're confronted with the fierce urgency of now, and there is a such thing as being too late. Changing weather patterns impacting our agricultural practices and natural resources, and more intense storms like Hurricane Matthew, Florence, Tropical Storm Michael, threatening our infrastructure, public health, and public safety, provide us with real evidence of another Dr. King quote. We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. So here we are this morning because we're not going to wait. Thanks to Governor Cooper's leadership, North Carolina is taking action, and this state will be on the right side of history. Executive Order 80 initiates the largest mobilization of clean energy resources and strategies in our state's history, from utilizing zero-emission vehicles to tasking all of us with the development of a state clean energy plan. This council was created to recommend the best ideas to meaningfully address our changing climate while keeping North Carolina safe, healthy, and globally competitive. Part of our responsibility is to scale the efforts of state and local governments and the private sector, which have helped position North Carolina as a national leader in the development of clean energy technologies, as well as 21st century jobs. North Carolina is second in the nation in solar generation, and that's good for today. But for tomorrow, we must be a leader in advanced modes of transportation, battery storage, innovation, 21st century electric grid infrastructure investments, and other technologies that will continue to spur our economy, protect our public health, and our natural resources, not only for today, but for future generations. North Carolina will only remain competitive in a global economy with innovation and investments in a more resilient state that rebuilds both stronger and smarter. That innovation and investment happens when we do the following. When we band together as leaders because there's power in numbers, follow where the science, the data, and facts lead us, empower the marketplace of ideas and technology, challenge our future generations to think big, and remember that economic growth and environmental protection are not mutually exclusive, but that they're actually mutually beneficial. Thanks to Governor Cooper's leadership, North Carolina is leading again on a national and global scale. I also want to commend my fellow cabinet members for answering the governor's call to lead. And I must say it is an honor and a privilege to be a member of what many say is the most talented cabinet in North Carolina's history. And I'm confident that none of my cabinet colleagues will disagree with that statement, even if we are slightly biased. So I'm encouraging the members of this talented council to bring their best ideas to this comprehensive discussion, even if those ideas are untried and untested. As Einstein said, if the idea is not absurd, then there is no hope for it. The Department of Environmental Quality is honored to host this council in a venue where we're reminded of the science and what's at stake. And I'm also honored to introduce a leader who truly understands the fierce urgency of now and who has challenged each and every one of us to lead an effort that will leave no North Carolinian behind, Governor Roy Cooper.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. I look across this room, I see a lot of leaders who have given decades of their life to make this state what it is. We all love North Carolina. We want to make it better. I'm so grateful that you have come today to talk about Executive Order 80, because this executive order is going to result in action and in progress that's going to affect every single North Carolinian. Sometimes you see proposals and executive orders and you don't hear any more about it. You will continue to hear about this executive order almost every day. This is why I have convened this most talented, diverse, qualified cabinet in the history of our state today. Secretary of Department of Information Technology, Eric Boyette. Secretary of Revenue, Ron Penny. You guys raise your hand because I'm going to make sure these guys, who these guys are. Our Secretary of Natural and Cultural Resources, Susie Hamilton. Our Secretary of Public Safety, Eric Hooks. Our Secretary of Transportation, Jim Trogdon. Our Secretary of the Department of Administration, Michelle Sanders. Our Secretary of the Department of Commerce, Tony Copeland. And our Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, Mandy Cohen. And of course, the leader of this particular council, our Secretary of the Department of Environmental Quality, Michael Regan. All of these secretaries are here because they know the importance of this moment. You think about North Carolina in the decades before. We had the foresight to, when we had an administration in Washington that was trying to go backward on environmental policy like is happening now, we stepped up and said, okay, if they're not going to, the EPA is not going to reduce our coal-fired plant emissions, we're going to do it. And North Carolina came forward with Clean Smokestacks plan that has helped us reduce our greenhouse emissions and has given us a good start. It also gave me, as then Attorney General, the authority to make sure through litigation, if we needed to, that other states help this situation because pollution doesn't respect the state lines. We sued the Tennessee Valley Authority. We ended up with a significant settlement after a court victory that significantly reduced greenhouse gases in the entire southeastern United States. And we're proud of that. We've also been a leader in solar by requiring more generation, more of that portfolio of generation of power to be renewable, and that has helped put us at number 2. But since 2011, we have not made the kind of progress that we need to make. It is now time to step up, bring together all of state government, bring together our business community, our environmental community, and to make sure that North Carolina is a leader in fighting climate change, which we know is here, which scientists tell us could end up being catastrophic for the entire planet. So when you think about the kind of catastrophes that could occur if we don't do anything, all you have to think about is North Carolina over the last couple of decades. We have had 3 so-called 500-year floods within 19 years, and 2 of them within 23 months. It doesn't take much travel in these communities to see the utter devastation, to see small businesses destroyed, to see churches underwater, one that I saw in Pender County just last week, up to the roof, seeing people without homes, often people who were having trouble with affordable housing to start with, seeing farmers lose their crops. In these last couple of years, we had Hurricane Matthew come through. Then less than 2 years later, Hurricane Florence, which was our largest catastrophe in history, almost $17 billion in damage, the loss of 42 lives, the kind of rain that went on and on and on. And then just beginning to dry out, Hurricane Michael comes through the Piedmont area of our state. We're fighting every day for resources. Thank the businesses who've stepped up. Thank the volunteers, the people of faith who have been out there helping their neighbors. I want to thank local governments, the first responders. We've been able to get the General Assembly. We work with them to provide significant funding. The federal government has stepped up. I've been in Washington talking with them. We're thinking good news is coming, help from there. We're working to rebuild smarter and stronger. We've set up our North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resilience in core, which we believe is going to result in significant improvement on how these resources are distributed in our planning. But it's not enough for us to recover from one storm and prepare for the next. We have to join with gusto this overall fight against climate change. I issued this executive order which says we are going to, in North Carolina, reduce our greenhouse emissions by 40% by the year 2025. And we're already working toward that goal, but each percentage that you go gets harder and harder. We have to have a plan that will work. We have to have a plan that we know we can pull through this together. This order directs that we increase zero-emission vehicles. That is something that state government can do. It says that the Department of Environmental Quality will put together a plan to improve energy efficiency in state government buildings, and it calls on the Department of Commerce to expand clean energy businesses and jobs and to recruit them. Today's meeting and throughout this effort to implement Executive Order 80, I want to challenge these cabinet secretaries to do three things. First, I want you to consider clean energy and climate change in your work every single day. This is an urgent issue that affects everything we do. We need to remember that and work accordingly. Next, we need to make changes within our agencies to reduce harmful greenhouse gas emissions. We need to make our offices more efficient. We need to encourage our employees to make changes at work and at home that are smarter and healthier for our environment and our economy. The businesses that work with us, encouraging them to do the same. And finally, we need to make sure that we work together on this. There's a reason that all of these cabinet secretaries are here today in one place, and believe me, they are some of the busiest people you can possibly imagine running state government efficiently and with quality work is hard work. But they are here because they know this is important. And they will have designated someone, and that's already been done, someone in their department to be the conduit, to be the person who attends these meetings, who brings it back to the secretary. We want the secretaries to come to some of these meetings. I will be at some of these meetings. But we need to make sure that this plan works and it is coordinated and it is at the highest level of each one of our departments. Each of us has a role to play, and we've got to collaborate like never before to protect our communities from the effects of these catastrophic events, encourage further use of clean energy, and grow a stronger economy. I'm so thankful for the people who have worked so hard to get us where we are right now. And we are just getting started. But I want to publicly thank Secretary Regan for his leadership on this. And I encourage all of you to work with him as we strive to meet these goals. Sarah Bolton is our policy director, and working with her is Jeremy Tarr, who is sitting to my left. Jeremy worked extensively on putting this together and making sure that we had the right direction. So I'm grateful for that. And I want to thank all of you who are here, who are going to take part in this, because it's going to take all of us working together. You got an administration that believes in science, believes in facts, believes in data-based research. We want to be effective in what we do. And guess what? This is going to end up improving our economy. This is going to create better paying jobs for us. This is going to help make us a destination state. This is not a sacrifice. This is a step toward, yes, a cleaner economy, fighting a cleaner environment, fighting climate change, cleaner water, but it also is a strong move to show that North Carolina is ready for these new jobs of the future, that we're ready for this technology, and we are excited about the days ahead. Grew up on a farm in Nash County, often walked the forest with my father. It is critical that we move forward in the right way. We're going to disagree on some things. We're going to disagree on how far we can go, but we've got to come up with a plan together and understand we're all working toward the same goal. Mr. Secretary, I appreciate it. I'm very happy to see that this North Carolina A&T 2017 HBCU College Football National Champions is on your desk today. And back-to-back ain't bad.
That's right.
My North Carolina Central grad Chief of Staff, Christy Jones, is nowhere in sight right at the moment. And I told her when she won something that she could get invited to the mansion too. I appreciate you guys very much. I'm looking forward to this effort, and thank you in advance for the hard work you're going to put in this. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. And I tell you, it feels really good to have a leader as dedicated to this issue as Governor Cooper is. We'll transition into our next step here, and the governor has already sort of introduced all of our cabinet secretaries, but we will take time for each cabinet secretary to introduce his or her designee. And I'll start with mine for the Department of Environmental Quality, who has been the catalyst behind pulling this together and leading a pretty large team already at DEQ, and that's Ms. Sushma Mazemore. I'll start with Secretary Sanders.
Sure. The Department of Administration designee is Deputy Secretary Mark Edwards.
Department of Commerce will be John Harden.
Department of Health and Human Services. We have two, we're kind of big. From our facilities team, who's here with us, is Peter Voigt and Iris Cooper, who runs our procurement work as well.
Department of Information Technology will be Nate Denny. He's our Chief of Staff.
Department of Revenue's designee is Assistant Secretary Angela.
I hear you.
Not used to that. The Department of Revenue's designee is the Assistant Secretary Angela Altice.
Good morning. The Department of Natural and Cultural Resources designee is my Chief Deputy, Reed Wilson, and also our Capital Projects Director, Aaron Lawrence. They're both here. Thank you.
Good morning. The designee for the Department of Public Safety is here with me today. He's our Chief Financial Officer, Doug Holbrook.
DOT designee, 2 for the price of 1, is Chief Operating Officer Bobby Lewis, and our Director of Technical Services, Chris Werner.
Well, thank you to all of you for signing up for this endeavor. We look forward to working with everyone. I'll turn it over to Sharon.
Apologies. At this point, we'll move to agenda item number 2, and Jeremy Tarr, the policy advisor from the Office of the Governor, will give us an overview of Executive Order number 80.
Good morning. I'm Jeremy Tarr, policy advisor in the North Carolina Governor's Office. I'm also the designee to the council from the Governor's Office. So I'm going to take about 10 minutes to give you an overview of Executive Order 80. It's a wide-ranging executive order. I'll cover some of the principal provisions, but I encourage you to download it and read it on your own when you have time. So I'm going to break it down into 4 sections. The first is I'll talk about the state goals outlined in the executive order. Second, talk a little bit about the duties of the Climate Change Interagency Council here. Third, we'll talk about some of the specific directives that the executive order gives to 4 departments. And then fourth, cover some of the general directives that apply to all cabinet agencies and that the governor alluded to. So first, the executive order has 3 state goals. One, and these each will be accomplished by 2025. The first is to achieve a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from 2005 baseline year. That's a common baseline in international and other contexts. The second is to increase the number of registered zero-emission vehicles to 80,000 by 2025. With these first 2 targets, they are statewide targets. So this isn't zero-emission vehicles in the state motor fleet or 40% reduction in state government's greenhouse gas footprint. This is statewide across the economy. This is statewide registered zero-emission vehicles on North Carolina roads. Third is to reduce state energy consumption by at least 40% from fiscal year 2002 to 2003. Again, all of these to be achieved by 2025. Executive Order 80 establishes this body, the North Carolina Climate Change Interagency Council. As you learned, it's comprised of the secretaries, designees of each of the governor's cabinet agencies and a representative from the governor's office. Secretary Regan will be the council chair. And the executive order outlines a handful of duties for the Climate Change Council. So I mentioned the 3 initial goals under EO 80. This council can recommend new targets. It can also recommend updates to these goals that are currently outlined. The council also has the authority to recommend new actions to make sure that the state is meaningfully addressing climate change. The council has the authority to develop new programs and activities to support climate change mitigation and adaptation. The executive order directs all cabinet agencies to consider stakeholder input throughout implementation of the executive order. The council has an important role in implementation of the executive order by helping to schedule and monitor and providing input on the preparation and development of plans and assessments that are directed by the EO. And I'll explain some of those in a second. Each of these plans and assessments will be developed by a lead agency under the executive order, but then will be submitted to this body, which will then submit the plans and assessments to the governor by the due dates. By October 15th of each year, the council will give a report to the governor that is basically a status report, how we're doing on implementation of the executive order. Third, when it comes to specific directives, the executive order gives directives to 4 different cabinet agencies. One is the Department of Environmental Quality, and so DEQ will develop a clean energy plan, which will help encourage the transition of North Carolina to a clean energy economy, help with increased usage of clean energy technologies in the public and private sector. This plan and all plans will have concrete actions and recommendations, and we look forward to everyone here's input on how to, on the substantive input on this plan and all the other ones that I'll mention. DEQ already has a comprehensive energy, water, utility use conservation program. The executive order calls for an update to this program to be consistent with the directives in the executive order. The first update will happen by February 1st, and then biannually starting December 1st of 2019, there will be periodic updates. DEQ is also developing a risk assessment and resiliency plan. This plan is important in a number of ways. It will give North Carolina an updated scientific assessment of the current and projected impacts of climate change on our state. In addition, with that information, it will be able to prioritize effective actions to address projected impacts of climate change on our state. The EO also directs DEQ to develop a greenhouse gas inventory. DEQ has already released a draft of this. And this greenhouse gas inventory is important because it gives us an accounting, a snapshot of where we are in terms of greenhouse gas emissions now, net sort of greenhouse gas footprint by the state per sector, and will also include business as usual projections of where we're going, absent policy interventions. To the Department of Transportation, the executive order directs the development of a North Carolina zero-emission vehicle plan. This will be a state plan designed to achieve the zero-emission vehicle target of 80,000 registered ZEVs on the road by 2025. It will address such topics as designating zero-emission vehicle corridors in the state, identifying the types of zero-emission vehicle infrastructure and strategies to make sure we have the infrastructure needed to support that number of vehicles. The plan will also address a number of other best practices. Department of Commerce, as the governor mentioned, will develop clean energy and clean transportation workforce assessments. The electricity sector and the transportation sector are undergoing tremendous transformation right now. These assessments will help evaluate current and future workforce needs in light of those transitions, will assess the skills and education that workers will need in order to get jobs there in those sectors, and will recommend actions to help North Carolinians ensure that they're qualified in these fields going forward. The Department of Administration will develop a motor fleet zero-emission vehicle plan. And so in this plan, it will do a number of things, including identifying the types of trips that the state employees can make using a zero-emission vehicle. What types of trips are feasible with a zero-emission vehicle? That plan will also include recommendations on needed infrastructure to support increased use of zero-emission vehicles by state employees. It will address ZEV procurement options and include other key strategies that are needed, again, to increase ZEV use by state government. Annually, DOA will also provide an accounting of each agency's number of zero-emission vehicles, miles traveled by vehicle type, so that we're able to see our progress along the way. Fourth, the executive order has a number of general directives that apply to all cabinet agencies. As the governor did in front of us, the executive order directs cabinet agencies to evaluate the impacts of climate change on agency operations and programs, to integrate climate change mitigation and adaptation practices into agency operations. And it also directs the cabinet to support communities and sectors that are particularly vulnerable to climate change. So what this means for each cabinet agency will depend, because the mission, the expertise, the types of programs that cabinets do vary by cabinet. So this will be implemented in different way for each department by design. Cabinet agencies will support clean energy businesses. So the executive order directs state government to take actions that support the expansion of clean energy businesses and service providers, to enhance clean technology investment, and to support companies that have prioritized the procurement of clean energy. The executive order directs all cabinet agencies to prioritize zero-emission vehicles when they purchase or lease new vehicles, and also to use them, right? They're not just going to sit in the parking lot, to procure them and to use them. And this is whenever feasible. So there are some trips that does not make sense to use a zero-emission vehicle for today, and that's the way it is. But where that does make sense, where it is feasible, zero-emission vehicles can be used. As I mentioned earlier, the Department of Administration's Motor Fleet Zero-Emission Vehicle Plan will identify the trips that can be feasibly made using a zero-emission vehicle. And then when ZEVs are not feasible, we will prioritize cost-effective, low-emission alternatives. And then the last point I'll make is that the executive order in Section 8 includes a number of directives that basically will help state government improve our energy efficiency. And so in particular, each cabinet agency will designate a point of contact for energy, will develop a management plan for utility usage so that we can become more efficient, and will report annually on utility consumption. So again, it's not everything, but it covers a lot of territory. I appreciate everyone's interest and commitment to implementing the executive order. It is going to be a challenging task ahead of us, but I think it's going to be well worth it. Please let me know how I can help along the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. And now Sushma Mazemore, our Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Environment, will give an overview of the Council and its schedule.
Good morning. As it was mentioned, each department will be represented by designees. These designees are, could we forward the slides? Two designees are requested to be assigned, and some agencies have defined more than one. Our goal was to ensure that we have primary points of contact in terms of communication, coordination, and planning. There is an executive level designee and several program level designees depending on the size of the agency. Based on lessons learned in the past of how we have done similar kind of activities, we believe that this is one way to ensure success is achieved. Pre-planning meetings will be organized, and we will discuss with your staff and with your designees strategic direction. We will plan out future council meetings. We will set agendas. We will communicate to the public and stakeholders. We will update our websites. We will work with our communications folks to ensure that what we're doing is in public's best interest. We will ensure that the goals we take and the actions we prioritize are consistent with EO80. Each of the executives would be encouraged to attend all of the council meetings, and I will go over the calendar in a few minutes. We also want to make sure that they have the authority or the ability to attain authority to implement specific actions that are identified through our collective work. And regarding communications with the public, DEQ has started a website. There's a link on the slides, and all these slides will be posted, so it'll be available for everyone's use. The names and the contact information for the designees are at the end of the slide deck, so if you need to reach out individually or through us, we're happy to coordinate that. We encourage each of the agencies to maintain at least a single point of entry related to your EO80 related climate actions, whether it's small or big. It provides the public and us the understanding of where we are, what is the timeline, what is the status. We encourage those web links to be linked back to DEQ so that if someone comes through DEQ's portal, they have access to each of the agencies. So a lot of these logistical items will be worked out in our future planning meetings. Any future stakeholder meetings or internal work group meetings you all have, we have been notified that public wants access to it. They would like to be involved. They would like to be informed. So we need to figure out a way to ensure that happens, whether it's through individual agencies or through DEQ's website. We need to maintain a calendar. And then there's a need for social media presence, and our communications folks are, as you can see today, well versed, and we will continue to use technology and information systems as best as we can to communicate in our future events. This next slide gives an idea of what our thoughts are in future council meetings. Today is our first inaugural meeting attended by our secretaries. We anticipate between now and October 1, which is when 3 or 4 of our plans are due, that we will have 5 more meetings, once every other month. These meetings will be led and attended by executive level staff and their program level staff. We'll be meeting routinely. My thinking is every other week to develop the agenda and prioritize what is it that we address in the following meetings. Our announcements for meetings will be posted on our DEQ Climate Council website. The link is provided here. The intent is between second and fifth meeting, we will provide updates to the status of our plan development work, the kind of comments that are coming in, priorities that were established based on outside of EO80 but related to this big complex subject we are asked to address. And then by the 6th meeting, which is scheduled for September, it will be attended again by all the full cabinet secretaries. And it is the intent that at this point we will provide the reports, the Clean Energy Plan, the ZEV Plan, and the Motor Fleet ZEV Plan to the secretaries for review and approval so that they are ready, the plans are ready for delivery to the governor's office as due on October 1. This is a very aggressive schedule and aggressive timeline. We all feel the pressure. We know the enormous responsibility and tasks ahead of us. We all have our day jobs. We do many other things. And so we ask for assistance, cooperation, suggestions, and constructive feedback as we add this complex subject into our normal duties. Talking to many other states across the country, we realize there's really not a single roadmap, a single pathway to address climate change in a big state government. There will be lessons learned, there will be mistakes we will make, but we will move forward together and do the best we can to address this issue. It's our intent that by 7th meeting at the end of the year, around November, we will continue with the progress required in the EO80. The next deliverable is for the climate risk assessment and resiliency plan, and I haven't added that in the slides. And then finally, the location of these meetings, we're trying to spread it out across the state so everyone gets a chance to participate, and so stay tuned with the agendas. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushma. Thank you, Jeremy, as well. We'll transition to the next part of the program, which is focusing on the cabinet agency specific directives. And so we'll start with Sushma, and then we'll transition to each of the cabinet agencies represented today.
Thank you, Secretary Regan. So I'm going to talk about 3 of the key areas that the EO80 requests the Department of Environmental Quality to deliver reports. The first is the Clean Energy Plan, and the second is the Climate Risk Assessment and Resiliency Plan, and the third is the State Buildings Utility Savings Initiative response. I'll start out with the Clean Energy Plan. As Governor said, we are at a transition in the way electric power will be generated, transmitted, and distributed. That nexus between modern technology and the way energy is going to be supplied to the consumers is at a revolutionary pace. technology innovation, communication systems are at a point where electricity produced and supplied will be at a different paradigm in the next 10 years. Many states are embracing these opportunities to position themselves to advance and to create opportunities for their citizens. We recognize this opportunity that it provides for North Carolina, and we want to engage in the dialogue to embrace that opportunity. One of the first things we want to do in the Clean Energy Plan is to develop a common vision for North Carolina's energy vision. To develop this vision, we're going to need feedback from stakeholders. We're going to go around the state. We're going to ask, what role does the fossil fuel sector play in that clean energy future? What role does the renewables and advanced systems, energy efficiency, battery storage, all of that play in that future? We will ask, what are the issues? What are the needs? What are the barriers? And what do you think are the solutions? What are the opportunities that are unrealized? What are the opportunities that are already realized? In this changing dynamic, will there be any equity concerns related to how electricity is supplied and the cost of that electricity? And what are the type of actions that can be done at the state level and in the private sector and the public sector to address this opportunity as well as the challenge? We realize that analyzing this concept is not an easy thing. We have less than 6 months to do this work. Most states take 2-3 years to do a comprehensive energy plan. But it is the start. In addition to seeking stakeholder input, we want to do a technical analysis that looks at the impact of the current scenario, the current plans, versus what a different future, a different energy plan, a different energy mix, a different opportunity reveals, and what the collective impacts of those alternatives are relative to the current pathway on the rates, on environmental performance, on emissions, economic opportunity, and job creations, but also the rate impacts. But most of all, there is a concern that as these new systems are integrated, that there could be issues with grid reliability and affordability. So these are many factors that need to be weighed in looking at the energy plan. The results of these analyses we're expecting to come out about middle of next year. We will go back to the stakeholders, share these results. We will get their feedback, input, and then based on that, recommend actions based on those priority ideas that surface to the top. These recommendations may consist of policy, regulatory, administrative actions that the state government can take on. These are recommendations. And then there will be ideas that public and private sector agencies businesses can take on their own to encourage that growth. And then the public engagement process that we envision in all of this is a combination of an open process. We will share as much as we can. We will communicate on every aspect of this plan development. But we don't want to be tied down to so many planning and coordination that we're not able to focus on the actual work at hand. We have many folks that have approached us for assistance, and we will take in input and assistance from private sector, from public sector, as well as environmental groups, trade associations, you name it, and the stakeholder list is identified. The initial public meeting will be an open process that we're envisioning. This will occur in Raleigh. Our idea is that this meeting will occur in about February. Our postings will identify where and when. Then there will be general listening sessions across the state to get that public feedback on what is the vision of that clean energy future. And then finally, we will have multiple facilitated stakeholder process meetings. These will be targeted towards a subject, an issue, or a concept. We're putting these things together, and we've been talking to many folks. We encourage ideas and thoughts towards building the stakeholder process to us. So it's anticipated that in between January and March, we will complete the public engagement and stakeholder process. And our output out of this is a vision development and issues and solutions development. Between April and May, we'll be doing the technical analysis, a combination of modeling analysis to look at the economic environment and grid reliability impacts. We have some existing work that is going on. We will tap into that. But more than that, we will rely on additional resources that are being provided by EPA, DOE, and several other organizations that are doing similar work. These studies will be targeted specifically for North Carolina, so it becomes relevant and useful. We do not anticipate that the results of these will be at such a resolution that it will provide answers to everything, but it will be at least at a screening level and an understanding level to give us a pathway and a roadmap of what are the priority areas that we should be focusing on. As Governor Cooper said, it is up to us to define what the next 10 years of North Carolina's legacy is going to be in the energy and the environment sector. And we hope this creates an opportunity to create that legacy and a roadmap of achieving those goals. A draft plan is scheduled to be delivered to the council around end of August. This plan would go through a public comment period, and then we will issue the final report to the governor on October 1st. And then these websites will allow an idea of how we plan to communicate via various means that I already talked about. I'm going to move on because there's so many things that needs to be covered. I'm sorry about that. The next item that DEQ is responsible for is the development of a statewide climate risk assessment and resiliency plan. This is not just a DEQ ownership. This is going to require a collective effort from all state agencies, local governments, communities affected by climate change, and all the stakeholders that are interested in developing a response strategy and how we best prepare for the impacts of climate change. One of the first things that we'll need to do is explore the hazards that are posed from different climate scenarios. You all have heard about the National Climate Assessment that has been released, and this is a result of many discussions and debates recently. We can take some of the work products out of that and downscale it to North Carolina so that we can understand what are the climate impacts to North Carolina. Our goal is, and the thoughts are that we convene an expert group of science and climatological experts to address the local state level climate assessments through the existing data systems and information that are available, and acquire new information through their collective effort. These experts will represent the university sectors, experts that do analysis themselves, and folks at the federal level that have offered to help. So we will get started on convening this group and hope that in about 3 to 4 months that they can deliver a report that is an indication of what their assessment of climate impacts to North Carolina are. This report can become a good guidance document for each agencies to address climate change into their program areas. It is a vital piece of information because we do not have a clear pathway and understanding of which program areas are going to be affected by the various scenarios that are being predicted for North Carolina. The second thing that's need to be done is assessing vulnerability. Vulnerability is the propensity to be affected adversely by these impacts. And it is one of the key steps in building a resiliency plan. And then when you combine that with hazards and vulnerability and exposure, you look at your risks at the state level and at the individual community level. The risk allows you to understand what is the probability of occurrence and how do you best respond to that risk? How do you protect those resources? So within state government, we have assets, we have services that we provide. This analysis will provide an indication of which of the value streams is at most risk, and how do we protect that? Whether it's our buildings or whether the natural resources that we protect, all of those things will come out of this analysis. The culmination of this work product will be a resiliency plan. And our goal is to evaluate not only the effects, what is at what is at highest risk, but also evaluate costs and benefits and losses and feasibility of doing this. The plan is a living document. It hopefully will be something that is revised in future years at every 3 to 5 year pace, because our knowledge and our understanding of the impacts and the science will change. Our ability to try and take actions will provide some indications of what is working, what is not. And so this resiliency plan has never been done at a level that we're asking at the state level. We're going to need experts. We're going to put our thoughts together and have our own staff and universities that do this on a routine basis to work together. Again, this will be an open, facilitated stakeholder process. We have a lot to learn on this area, but we will get there. We have an active DEQ DEQ Natural and Working Lands stakeholder group that is looking at conservation and management techniques to protect our natural resources and our environment. A lot of those activities are going to coalesce into the resiliency plan. And then finally, here's the timeline. Very similar to the clean energy plan. We have a little bit longer. The final report is due to the governor in March of 2020. But the schedule lays out the tremendous amount of work that needs to be done in the planning and execution. And it'll be work in progress. You know, I'm not saying this would be one report that's going to answer everybody's questions. We will do our best. There will be some things that will need revisited. And then our communication methods will be standardized throughout the department between DEQ and our various agencies. So I'm not going to walk through it, but it's just here for your reference. And then finally, I will get out of your way so others can talk. The state buildings is another program that is intended to improve the energy consumption or energy intensity, the amount of total energy used per square feet of building space is being looked at in reducing it further by another 10%. Currently, the target is 30%. All of our state agencies have exceeded that level. And the goal here is to exercise additional options and get to a 40% level. To just give you an idea of how important this is, when we did our greenhouse gas emissions inventory for North Carolina buildings, our state buildings, consume 1% of the total energy consumed statewide. 1%, that's today, not counting all the reductions that have been achieved over a decade. That 1% can be further reduced because there are some low-hanging fruits, but there are other additional opportunities. In order to do that, our Utility Savings Initiative program will embrace this challenge. We will make changes to the comprehensive program as needed to make our cabinet agency buildings more efficient. We will encourage our other agency partners that are not affected by this EO to do the same. We will promote best practices, provide training, identify funding opportunities, and do our best in order to ensure that those projects are executed. And then there needs to be a common format for calculating, analyzing, and reporting. We will do that with our partners. And then finally, there will be a report that will be consistent with what the statute requires, but it will integrate the implementation of this new program that is being added to the cabinet agency's tasks. Our public engagement process is more internal, but we will prepare reports and updates to our public if they're interested in looking at that. And so at the end, I'm just going to quickly go through the timeline. This will be one of the first work products that will be coming out, and you'll see some reports in January and February time period. And I guess that's it. If there's any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me or any of my staff, and Secretary Regan, of course, for good things, and we'll be happy to help out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sushma. And next, we'll transition to Secretary Trogdon.
Good morning, everyone. First, our focus at the Department of Transportation is work collaboratively to develop the zero-emission vehicle plan and the development process in accordance with Section 5 of the executive order. Our general approach, we've already got a core team established. We're going to expand that multidisciplinary team to work on this, to follow through with the EO and implement the EO. We already have, for everyone's knowledge, 9,000 electric vehicles registered in North Carolina today. The target is 80,000 full electric by 2025. First, we're going to continue to work with DEQ on phase 1 of the ZEV infrastructure allocation of funds through the VW air quality violation settlement. We believe that will be the first step in critically delivering the infrastructure needed to support ZEV growth in North Carolina. We've already have work done on alternative fuel corridors. We're going to accelerate that growth. We have signage ready for CEG, which is not zero emission, but reduced emission for CNG vehicles, and then also signage ready corridors for electric vehicles. So this plan will be, where do those corridors need to go? The core should be, how do we support ZEV growth through infrastructure? And from my simple standpoint, I like to say we have to reduce range anxiety for folks who want to buy zero-emission vehicles. So not part of the plan, but important at DOT is we're going to start at home by identifying how we can implement electric vehicles ourselves in support of Section 7. That will be critical. And then additionally, very important, we want to leverage our long-range planning efforts that we already have under what we call NC Moves in 2050. That's our process that's currently underway to determine what will transportation look like by 2050 and make sure our 2025 short-term goals under the EO and the long-term will be mutually supportive. The ZEV plan is just for how do we get the ZEVs to 80,000. We know by 2050, North Carolina will be connected, autonomous, electric with a lot more shared vehicle services. So how do we make sure we have the infrastructure, the design processes, the planning processes in place so these two plans will nest and be mutually supportive? The public engagement process, we're creating a climate change commitments webpage, which will go online in January next month. We'll use our existing public involvement processes, which are extensive, but we want to supplement that with what we are calling, and we've been testing this year, virtual public engagement, which is a way that we could really expand our outreach to stakeholders and the general public through electronic means, through cellular technology, through virtualization, so that people aren't forced to comment manually or go to a website. They'll get information dynamically when they open up things on their cell phones. And so we'll be able to rapidly expand our public engagement. And then continued participation that we already have with existing work groups, including both public as well as government and commercial stakeholders. As everyone knows, commercial market will deliver these zero-emission vehicles, but it's up to us to work with local government and the commercial markets to find the areas that we really need to expand to make North Carolina's program extremely successful. Our anticipated timeline is we will develop and have fully implemented our multidisciplinary team and establish the webpage in January, February through March, public engagement, plan development, potential issues and solutions identified, April through May, technical analysis and quantification of where do we see the benefits, what are the costs, how do we program that within the DOT structure or in partnership with our local governments or the markets to deliver these benefits. May through June, plan development, draft plan development, and then July through August, public comment period again. September, revise the plan and provide it to the Climate Council for an October consideration by the governor. Our communication method is through websites, extensive public involvement, including virtual public involvement, and then through our DMV offices and also through the Ready NC app. That concludes my update on where we're starting on the ZEV plan. And Mr. Chair, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Next, we'll hear from Secretary Copeland on workforce assessments.
Can you hear me? As you'll see, our task is to assess the workforce that's going to be available for the green energy sector and for the climate change. You know, under the Department of Commerce, we have NC Works and the Employment Security Commission, which was. So today what we're doing is we are assessing and changing what we do at NC Works with the 23 workforce boards, and we're collaborating today. Our partners are the community colleges, K through 12, and the university system to entail, other than directing changing curriculum needs, but also apprentice programs. One way we'll reach down into the K through 12, especially in the high schools, is working with Peter and Hans with the community colleges. I was with President Spellings not too long ago, and she was talking about, you know, what should they be looking at? I said, well, it's predicted there could be 30% of automobiles in the next decade will not have an internal combustion engine. We have over 100,000 people making automobile parts in North Carolina. So as a disruptive economy, what does that mean? So one of the things that we're going to be doing is assessing all of those needs, working to change curriculum and to focus on the needs for the future. You know, NC Works and the workforce boards, 15 years ago, we were looking at counties that had 15% unemployment. Today, we have a labor shortage. So we're changing the focus rather than, it used to be focused mainly on rapid response to plant closures and the like. I had one more tenure at the Department of Commerce years ago under Governor Easley, and I managed the closure of the Pilatex, the old Cannon Mills, which were 5,000 people lost their jobs and their pensions. You know, we lost more manufacturing jobs than any other state in the country in the first 3 years of this century. And now we're looking at a labor shortage in most of the state. So this fits in along with what we're doing. So we're going to work with all of our partners. We're going to work with the universities. We're going to work with K through 12. And when I mean the universities, I mean all the environmental schools, the marine science schools, the private schools like Duke and the Nichols School of the Environment. And we're going to be doing all the assessments of how we can change and focus on the workforce of the future. And you'll see from the timeline, we'll be following that timeline. By October, we'll have done our assessments and we'll be ready to proceed from there.
Thank you, Tony. Next, we'll hear from Secretary Sanders.
Good morning to each of you. Within the executive order and the directive, there are a few areas that touch DOA agency, including the State Construction Office, our Procurement and Contracts Office, Facilities Management, and Motor Fleet, as well as some of the others. Our approach to the zero emission vehicles, you have here our approach and the engagement process. What we're going to do is engage with our stakeholders, seek their input on what the priorities are, and of course identify what barriers and the challenges may be faced with an implementation of zero emission vehicles. Within our agency, we have begun identifying places within our parking footprint where we can implement and put forward charging stations in preparation for this. And so with that, we'll also be developing practices that we'll probably have to rely on the agencies to give us this feedback, but developing practices and processes where we can have an ongoing feedback of the trips, the types of visits that are going on, and where we can best have registration or distribution of zero emission vehicles. So once that is done, we will also include within our procurement options, of course, looking for vendors, contractors, and others who also have sustainability at the forefront of their mission, and that we can include in our supply chain for zero emission vehicles. As far as public engagement, it will be very much the same as what you've had, hosting meetings, social media feedback, focus sessions within the focus groups within the agencies, and also reaching out to some of our trade organizations to identify if other states are engaging or beginning to engage with zero emission vehicles, and learn from their best practices and incorporate that into our process. Before I go over the timeline, I mentioned to you State Construction Office within DOA. The State Construction Office is the primary lead for capital projects across state government. So we will be partnering closely with DEQ to identify ways that we can increase efficiency with any capital projects ongoing, as far as reviewing those that have been completed, for ways that we can add any type of technology or improvements that will increase our efficiency within the buildings that we have. And so with the motor fleet zero emission vehicle plan, as you can see here, the stakeholder engagement sessions, and we'll follow this guide through and submit a plan to the council to submit to the governor in September of 2019. I mentioned the communication methods to you previously. Within our agency website, we will incorporate a place where we can have readily accessible information on status, as well as other updates related to Executive Order 80. And our stakeholders include pretty much everybody across state government, cabinet agencies being our primary and stakeholder that we interact with most of the time, but it also includes Council of State and our UNC school systems, and of course the public citizens and residents are stakeholders as well. Any questions? Thank you.
So thanks again to Secretary Sanders and Copeland and Trogdon. You know, I think we're all hearing some emerging themes here: stakeholder engagement, transparency, and some pretty disciplined schedules. So I believe we have about 5 to 10 minutes built in for a break. And after that break, we'll come back and hear from the rest of the cabinet.
Secretary Regan.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, everyone, for coming back for the second half of this. I think we have more good news to share. We'll continue with the agency general directives, and I'll start to my right with Secretary Eric Hooks, Department of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Eric Hooks with the Department of Public Safety and for Education for our public. Department of Public Safety, we're 37,000 strong, comprised of law enforcement, emergency management, and public safety personnel, and National Guard servicemen and women who serve all across this great state. I'm pleased to be joined here today with our Chief Financial Officer, Doug Holbrook, and with our Chief Energy Manager, Paul Braze. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Doug Holbrook to express our role and our initiatives and our passion toward this most important endeavor, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Is it working now?
Yeah, there you go.
Good morning. I'm Doug Holbrook, the Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Public Safety. And I'm going to start off by discussing how some of the ways that climate change has affected affects our department. And first and most obviously, as we began the morning discussing, is our Division of Emergency Management is the lead state agency that responds when a disaster occurs, whether that be a hurricane, a winter storm, or a forest fire. And all of these things increase in frequency and intensity when the climate becomes less predictable. And these disasters demand a lot of state resources in immediate response to save lives, protect the lives of our citizens, and also to rebuild communities in the long run, which we do in partnership with other agencies, specifically Department of Commerce. DPS is a statewide organization that has thousands of buildings. The Division of Prisons alone comprises 19 million square feet of structures that houses our 37,000 inmates. The department's facilities are scattered all across the state in all kinds of terrain, and are therefore susceptible to all kinds of natural disasters. Recently, the department was forced to evacuate 3,000 inmates from prisons in the eastern part of the state ahead of Hurricane Florence, move them to the west, and the National Guard had several facilities damaged almost beyond repair by that storm. The size of our department just offers challenges and opportunities for us to address causes for climate change. One example related to today's initiatives is that we have the largest fleet of vehicles of any state agency. We have over 8,000 cars, buses, and vans that we use for all kinds of purposes. And so we are a regular client of the Division of Motor Fleet Management, but we also have a huge law enforcement fleet. Of course, law enforcement purposes may continue to require very high-powered vehicles. We have a large opportunity to work with Motor Fleet Management really to reach out and figure out reductions in our emissions from that large fleet that we use for moving so many people around the state. And again, the size of our fleet and our just general operation is such that even small changes have the potential to generate huge savings and huge enhancements to the state's environmental quality. The department is also a huge consumer of utilities. We spent almost $50 million last fiscal year on electricity, water, and sewer, and gas. Of that amount, $22 million is for electricity alone. We have employed Paul Brace, who is our professional engineer who oversees our energy saving program, and he has led us in developing several efforts that will start to contain costs, and is very enthusiastic and excited about carrying that forward. For example, the Division of Prisons has begun to implement an LED lighting implementation around the perimeter security for our prisons that has given us an 80% reduction in the cost of that lighting, and really with much improved quality and the safety around our prisons. And we're also doing LED lighting installations for interior lighting, which is allowing us some savings, but that is limited by the pace at which our maintenance crews can implement. Paul is a member of our Central Engineering Division, which has made this priority, energy savings and water system efficiency, priority for all of our structures. So we are working constantly on design, on enhancements. When we do repair and renovation, we are always doing it with energy efficiency and safety in mind. And similarly, our Division of Purchasing and Logistics contains our motor fleet operation, which is working every single day with Motor Fleet Management to acquire new cars, to maintain our cars, to assure that they are operating as efficiently as possible. And we'll be continuing through that process to migrate as much of our fleet to operations that reduce emissions over the next few years as possible. So we are certainly a full partner and a full customer of everyone else's services in helping to address the causes of climate change for the state.
Thank you. Next, we'll shift to Secretary Susie Hamilton, Department of Natural and Cultural Resources.
Thank you, Secretary Regan. Can you hear me? I didn't know I could turn it over to my chief deputy. He's sitting right here. Good morning, everybody. We're very excited about this opportunity to participate in having a positive impact on climate change. As someone who has personally experienced it recently, It is now at the top of our list of things to look into for the coming years. And also because the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources has many state parks, historic sites, museums, and other sites around the state of North Carolina, we are feeling the effects of climate change. Damages from catastrophic hurricanes such as Matthew, Florence, and Michael to our buildings, roads leading up to those buildings, equipments, trails, streams, and trees have been substantial. For Hurricane Florence alone, estimated costs are at $7.3 million. This includes $4 million in damages for recovery, $1.4 million for storm preparation, and $1.9 million in lost revenue from closed facilities and decreased visitation subsequent to the storm, which is unique to our department. Large wildfires are also an indication of climate change. Unusually extensive forest fires in 2016 burned more than 7,000 acres in and around Chimney Rock State Park and over 6,400 acres in South Mountain State Park. We are seeing flooding at the parking lot of the Battleship of North Carolina during high tides, so it's happening twice a day. With warmer climates, invasive species are moving into North Carolina, harming our native plants and wildlife at state parks and natural areas. The specific plans for our department include, well, let me back up. Prior to the issuance of Executive Order 80, our department at the instruction of the governor's office had created an environmental and energy performance team with representatives from all of our divisions. The team is instructed to help implementation of our energy, climate, and resiliency goals and that are consistent with this executive order. The team will also boost long-term sustainability in other ways, including waste reduction, recycling, elimination of single-use plastics, limiting water use, and creating web pages to communicate with the public about the department's actions and what steps people can take on their own. Some of our sites have already installed electric vehicle charging stations, while others with large visitation plan to follow suit. We will also look across our vehicle fleet to switch to zero-emission vehicles wherever possible. Many of our sites have switched to LED light bulbs, installed solar panels, or have taken other steps to reduce emissions and save money. We plan to spread this approach throughout the department to be more energy efficient and to expand the use of renewable energy sources. A number of our larger facilities have conducted energy and environmental audits so that they have benchmarks from which to measure progress. We will ask all of our divisions to conduct similar audits in 2019. For capital projects, repair and renovations, and procurement processes, DNCR will strive to use materials, processes, and products that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As an example, we are about to begin a pilot project to test a new refrigerant at several of our sites. For long-term climate resiliency, we suggest expanding funding for the Clean Water Management Trust Fund so that the vulnerable floodplains can be purchased and preserved. Coupled with that, additional funding for Parks and Recreation Trust Fund would enable the creation of parks, trails, and greenways in preserved floodplains, thus turning residential and commercial areas prone to damaging floods into popular community amenities that improve the health and quality of life. The Department of Natural and Cultural Resources is eager to take all the necessary steps to achieve the goals of this executive order. Because we are not experts on every aspect of the work ahead, I hope that one of the tasks this council will take on is to share our best practices across all state departments and use the policies and purchasing power of all state government to efficiently achieve our goals and reduce dangerous greenhouse gas emissions. We want to improve public health, create jobs, and strengthen the economy for decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Next, we'll hear from Secretary Ron Penny, Department of Revenue.
Thank you. We're excited about participating. When you think of the Department of Revenue, you think of paper. And we have, prior to this executive order, but certainly subsequent to this executive order, thought about our relationship with paper and how we will seek to reduce that. And so you will see more and more emphasis on digital filing, Digital filing is about 85% of what we receive annually, but you would be surprised at the volume that other 15% is in North Carolina. We have 22 million filings in North Carolina. And so 15% of 22 million is a lot of paper. And so we will be looking at making it more convenient, working on making it more convenient for all taxpayers in all of our tax schedules to file in a digital manner, thus reducing our footprint in that way. We also have recognized that we have facilities all over the state, and so working with DOA, not only will our preference be for energy efficient facilities, it will be our priority. In fact, we have begun to change the lighting in our downtown facility now and throughout the building, so it is more energy efficient lighting. With the number of filings that we have, there's a great volume of paper that comes in, checks and other things that come into the building. And those are processed by equipment. And so our purchasing, we will be looking at as and having as a requirement for that equipment the energy efficiency of that equipment. We spend a lot of time keeping that equipment cool. A lot of energy keeping that equipment cool because it is in constant use during most of the year. As I remind people, we collect taxes 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. And we thank you. And finally, we have employees all over the state of North Carolina, and many of those employees, because of what we do, many of those employees engage. We look at records in a digital way, and therefore it is just not. From a human resource standpoint and from an efficiency standpoint, necessary to have as large of a footprint in terms of buildings, because many of our employees can work from home, and we would still be able to measure, evaluate, and receive the same level of efficiency. And so we will be going back and looking over our implementation of telework, seeing what is necessary to be modified in order to make it more attractive to employees, and to keep in mind the impact it will have on our use of energy and our footprint in North Carolina. And that's all.
Thank you, Secretary Penny, and we are all reminded, we'll be careful how hard we push you since you govern all of our taxes. Next, we'll hear from Secretary Eric Boyette, Department of Information Technology.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't realize, as Susie mentioned, that we could defer this. So once again, Secretary Hooks and I have a running joke about who spells their name correctly. So evidently I got the short straw again. But no, thank you. We're excited about this order. Information technology, when you think about technology and you look at the data centers that we have in our state, you think about, how do we monitor those? What can we do to decrease our footprint in the climate atmosphere, in the climate change environment? So one thing we've already started doing is looking at how do we reduce temperatures? What can we do in those data centers to reduce temperatures, to decrease our electric footprint? And what else can we do as far as, I won't bore you as some of my cabinet peers talk when I talk technical, but there's things we can do as far as hardware. There's several things we can do in that area to reduce our footprint and just get, be more apparent about what we're doing and forward thinking about our technology and how we move forward. Also, we have General Statute 143-1365 that we're going through that mandates all of our data center consolidations. That's going to help you reduce footprint throughout the state. It always helps. We're also looking at how do we do things such as easy things, such as putting servers in standby mode. That's something that we can do now that we're looking at as well. One thing that we're excited about is, you look at North Carolina, we have, as you see Secretary Regan look at different types of renewable energy. How can we tap into that renewable energy, threshold? What can we do there to partner? So I'm excited about that as well. I mentioned the HVAC for the cooling. That's a big area for us. One of the things that, we do daily and we continue to do and we will continue to do in the future is how do we partner with our vendors? What are spaces that we are not doing that the vendor partners are doing? And what are some things that the vendors are not doing that we may ask the vendors to do? So that partnership with our vendor community that we have a great partnership with is going to be continued to be supported in that way. One thing we are doing, we are having a energy savings contest for our employees. I haven't told Secretary Reagan, but there's a piece in there I may need his assistance for. But it's something good that we're doing for our employees. And we've asked our senior leadership team to rally around it and bring us feedback. So what can we do that we're not doing? So just a lot of exploration, questions, answers, and a good note, I've already received some emails from some of our public about ways that they want to offer help. So we're going to do the same thing as you heard around some of the other cabinet secretaries about opening up for public comment. And I did like the way we're doing that. We're doing a lot of electronic means. So that's all I have, Secretary.
Thank you. Next, we'll transition to Secretary Dr. Mandy Cohen.
Good morning. I'll take that. Oh, now it's on. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to be here with such a great group of my colleagues and to be focusing on such an important issue. I won't repeat a bunch of the work that we are doing to start at home related to our own facilities. We have a pretty large footprint across the state and are going to be doing work to make sure that we are achieving the objectives of the executive order. The thing I did want to bring to this group is not only do we have a big footprint in terms of our location, but we are a very large procurement agency as well. And I think this is where we can collectively make a large impact as we think about those vendors that we work with. The federal government, through the General Services Administration, or GSA, has been doing this and has a pretty extensive green procurement program that I think we can bring here to North Carolina. Iris Cooper, who is the head of procurement for our department, who's not here today, but was head of procurement for the United States Treasury for a number of years, and luckily in her federal retirement decided to come back to North Carolina to help us here. So I think she can be a leader in our procurement work and in writing in, as we do new contracts and revise old, to make sure that folks are focused on these areas in particular, whether it's moving to the right types of vehicles or using their own facilities. And so there are ways that we will work and hope to share to Secretary Hamilton's good recommendations, share best practices in this space around the procurement. Other than what we are going to do as a department ourselves, we obviously know our mission is really to support the health and well-being of the state of North Carolina, and are going to continue to support the communities that are impacted by climate change in coordination with our emergency management partners at the Department of Public Safety, continue to work to make sure that housing and food and transportation and health are front and center for communities that have been impacted and continue to be impacted by climate change. And then lastly, want to make sure that our public health officials and scientists continue to work closely with your department to understand the science and to further that as we work to improve our state. So thank you for letting us be part of this discussion.
Thank you. And last but not least, Secretary Hall could not be with us today, but I believe we have representation for Military and Veterans Affairs, Mr. Cecil Holt.
Let's see. Yeah, the Department of Military and Veteran Affairs, we kind of have two sides. On the veteran side, we'll be focusing on the nursing homes, which are 24/7 operations, and initially focusing on trying to be more efficient with our lighting, changing out the T12s to T8s, and then eventually seeking funding for LED fixtures.
We'll also be looking at the older facilities and changing out the mechanical systems. On the military side, I'm going to let my colleague Robert Johnson speak. We hope to target the military installations throughout the state.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay, very well. I'm Mr. Johnson, one of the program coordinator for the North Carolina Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. Secretary Reagan, I thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. As you know, ladies and gentlemen, with the military installation, our military installations here in North Carolina, we have more military personnel than every state in the nation except for Texas and California. So our military installation plays a vital role in the climate change process. I will begin, I will keep it short and easy for y'all this morning. Now take a look at Fort Bragg. I retired out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And down at Fort Bragg is the largest military installation in North Carolina. So some of the things that Fort Bragg is doing down there with the military construction, they have integrated what we call energy resilient plan with their military construction. New LEDs lighting, the heating and air conditioning system, electrical system, those all are being integrated in the new building process. Let me give you an example. DFACS, dining facility. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Is that better? Dining facilities is a facilities where the men and women eat their breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Then we have our military housing, barracks, tactical maintenance facilities, all of those being integrated into the 2017, 18, 21 military construction plan, sir. What does that entail? That entails a comprehensive, thorough knowledge of planning by taking the buildings, the barracks, the mess halls, things of that nature, and putting an energy efficient process in place from 2018 up into 2022. So in other words, the major military installation in North Carolina, Military Ocean Terminal Sunny Point, Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point, New River, Fort Bragg, Elizabeth City Coast Guard Facility, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, those bases have incorporated an energy resilient plan. And we understand that climate change is very vital. Every 3 months here, we have what we call the North Carolina Commanders Conference, the NCCC. Some of you all may be aware of that. Our commanders, they are not oblivious to this here. They will be there, and we will discuss the climate change, Secretary Reagan. And this will be very vital to our military installation. As you know, local, state, and federal, there are some different guidelines. But those bases, sir, they are here in North Carolina, and they will adhere to the climate change. As I say again, Secretary Reagan, the NCCC commanders, they will be enlightened. They will be abreast of this information, not oblivious to it, and they most definitely will comply. So within the 3 months from the next NCCC meeting will be in February, sir. We will go over these issues and concerns with those commanders. Whether they're outgoing or incoming, he or she will be updated on what we are trying to address and achieve here in our state of North Carolina. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you, Cecil and Robert. You know, our national security and our men and women in uniform are so important to us, so we appreciate that. I guess we can transition to our next phase of the program, which is public engagement. You know, I'm really excited. I think not only the detail and the level of granularity that the cabinet secretaries have spoken at, but the discipline and the commitment that this cabinet is bringing is really impressive. So again, I want to thank all of my colleagues for being here and expressing what we plan to do over the coming months. Sharon.
Terrific. Thank you. We'll now start with the public engagement. We have a number of speaking slots that were available, and those of you that have signed up. I will remind you that this is that we have a limited amount of time to allow everyone to speak, so you'll be limited to 2 minutes. We will have someone signaling you when your time is up. Please lean into the microphone so that everyone in the room can hear you. And that the council is here to listen and to take note of your feedback. We'll have additional opportunities as this process goes along for public comment. And just a reminder for everyone in the room that we will post the slides from today's meeting on the website later today. So I'm going to call the first person and then the next person behind them. That would be Jennifer Jenkins, followed by Tom Clark. Yes, come to the podium. I'm sorry.
Great, thank you. Thanks a lot. Good morning. And I understand that who will be doing the time? Okay, great, thank you. I'll be watching you, thank you. My name is Jennifer Jenkins, and I am the Chief Sustainability Officer at Enviva. I am a biogeochemist by training with a technical background in forests and climate, and I've spent my 20-year career in and around climate issues. I know that Enviva's work to replace coal with biomass is a critical part of an orderly transition to a renewable future. This is important because climate change is everyone's problem, as we were urgently reminded by the brave young activist Greta Thunberg at the COP24 summit in Poland last week. We are out of excuses, and the world is nearly out of time. So we applaud the efforts of the Interagency Council, and we are especially encouraged to see that the Department of Environmental Quality will be developing a clean energy plan that encourages the utilization of clean energy sources, such as renewables. We would like to see biomass energy included explicitly as one of the options in that energy plan. By recognizing the greenhouse gas reduction potential offered by biomass, North Carolina would be joining governments around the world, including but not limited to the UK, Denmark, Belgium, France, Canada, and the US, that have recognized that when emissions from biomass are offset by carbon sequestration in growing trees, stack emissions from biomass are zero. North Carolina has recognized this potential as well. The North Carolina Renewable Portfolio Standard, finalized in 2007, includes biomass energy as one of the renewable energy options, and a North Carolina Climate Action Plan Advisory Group in 2008 also recommended bioenergy deployment as a greenhouse gas reduction strategy. Investing in biomass energy need not lead to diminished forest health. In fact, it's quite the opposite, because a robust market for forest products is what keeps landowners investing in their forests. And it's working. The investments made by the forest products industry in North Carolina are paying off with enhanced forest inventories and more forest acreage. Recent research in the peer-reviewed journal Energy Policy underlines the complementarity of bioenergy expansion and forest carbon sequestration, explaining that forest bioenergy expansion can complement carbon sequestration policies in the near and medium term. Thank you very much.
Tom Clark.
Good morning. Thank everyone for being here. My name's Tom Clark. I'm an impacted landowner of the ACP from Cumberland County. Governor Cooper, we appreciate what you and your staff are trying to do with the Executive Order 80, but that's like trying to sell a car with only 3 wheels. And here's a few reasons why I say that. The company that is supplying the pipe for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline highlights its use of the 3M coating on its website. That coating being used is 3M Scotch Coat Fusion Bonded Epoxy 6233. First, it can degrade in sunlight or with wind, rain, or other exposure to the elements. Second, it contains toxic ingredients. According to the manufacturer's safety data sheet, this coating contains a chemical or chemicals which can cause birth defects, reproductive harm, cancer, and other potential health effects. This is why we feel, unless executive order addresses the white elephant in the room, Atlantic Coast Pipeline, its goals will not be achieved. And those goals should be to leave our children and grandchildren a clean and safe world to live in. So, Governor Cooper and your staff, please put that fourth tire on this car and consider the ACP and its harm to impacted landowners.
Our next speaker is Liv Hutchby, followed by Ruth Zal.
Good morning. I'm from Orange County. I'm Liv Hutchby. I really appreciate the fact that you are here. Please, if you are a grandparent, will you stand? If you're a grandparent, will you please stand with us? And you may remain standing because we were hoping that Governor Cooper would be here to hear our remarks. So we are speaking to Governor Cooper, Secretary Regan, and the newly formed NC Climate Change Interagency Council. We as grandmothers are aware that fossil fuel infrastructures requires cutting trees, spoiling farmland, threatening already endangered species, and jeopardizing clean air and drinking water.
As a gift from our grandchildren, we wish to give Governor Cooper a book called The Lorax, written by Dr. Seuss, as a symbol of our grandchildren's demands for their future. As the Lorax said, I speak for the trees, for the trees have no tongues. Unless someone like you cares a whole lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not.
We expect all of you to read the Lorax. In fact, reading it aloud may convince you that it's important to meet with those whose lives are being affected daily. You should consider meeting with those who have requested repeatedly to meet with Governor Cooper and have been denied.
This climate crisis is very serious business. Already, cancer rates are soaring in North Carolina, and people are unable to feed their children. Without farms, there is no food. Without forests, there will be no clean air and no clean water.
Thank you, ladies.
Show all our grandchildren how much you care.
We want all of you to care, and we are not sure to whom to give this book now to be sure that Governor Cooper gets it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ruth Zalf, followed by Marvin Winstead.
Thank you. My name is Marvin Winstead. I'm from Nash County, North Carolina, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak to the group this morning. Governor Cooper should be commended for committing the North Carolina state government to reducing greenhouse gas emissions in North Carolina by 40% below 2005 levels by the year 2025. This will enable North Carolina to meet the commitments it has made under the Paris Climate Agreement. Executive Order 80 outlines how the state proposes to meet this goal. However, Governor Cooper has ignored one very important consideration in his analysis and order: the greenhouse gases that will be emitted if the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline is built. His administration approved permits for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline in January of this year, and the proposed pipeline is scheduled to be in operation in 2019. If the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline is built, there is no possible way that the Governor Cooper administration can meet its goal of 40% reductions in greenhouse gases by 2025. It is very simple to show this. According to an October 29 News and Observer article, North Carolina produced the equivalent of 152 metric tons of greenhouse gases in 2005. By 2025, North Carolina is committed to a level 40% below that, or a total of 91.2 metric tons. The state produced 114 million metric tons in 2017. A 40% reduction of this amount equals 38 metric tons between now and 2025, approximately 5.6 metric tons per year. According to a report by Oil Change International, who was assisted by North Carolina Warren, Appalachian Voices, and others, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline will annually produce emissions of 68 million metric tons of greenhouse gases, or the equivalent of 20 coal-fired plants, or 14 million automobiles annually. That is 68 million tons of greenhouse gases annually, more than 12 times the 5.6 tons of emissions Governor Cooper has promised that NC will cut emissions annually. The proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline undermines Governor Cooper's goals to limit climate change. Thank you very much.
Followed by Karen Bearden.
Morning, I'm Gary Smith. I live here in Raleigh. I'm a member of Community United Church of Christ in Raleigh and a volunteer with North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, a faith-based climate change advocacy and action organization. I just want to encourage you to engage faith organizations in the production and implementation of your plan. Faith-based organizations and the people within them are a very ready, enthusiastic group of people. I want to give you two examples, one of which we're currently engaged in helping reduce greenhouse gases, and another sort of an offhand idea. There's currently a weatherization program in DEQ, and some of the homeowners cannot be weatherized because the house needs little work. Well, we're working directly with DEQ to clean up those houses and prepare them so that they can be weatherized. Otherwise, they would not be weatherized, and the house would not be prepared. So that's going on now. The other thing is churches have large parking lots, and they would be great places for EV plug-ins. And I thank you for your time. Please include churches and faith communities in your work going forward.
Karen Bearden, followed by Mary Abrams.
Howdy, my name is Karen Bearden. I'm the 350 Triangle Coordinator, and my husband and I live in Raleigh. First of all, I want to say yay for Governor Cooper for introducing this EO80 and establishing this Climate Change Interagency Council. Gratefully, 18 North Carolina municipalities have already passed 100% renewable energy resolution, so work has begun. I would love to see a transition to regenerative agriculture also included in the statewide plan. North Carolina is affected by the climate crisis now. It is critical to move to a just transition to 100% renewable energy fast with the urgency of the crisis we are in. To be a real climate leader, Governor Cooper and North Carolina must stop all new fossil fuel projects. No toxic Atlantic Coast and Mountain Valley pipelines, no compressor stations, offshore drilling, and more. North Carolina must cut off the flow of money to fossil fuel industry with divestments in the state pension fund, break up with mega banks that support fossil fuel projects, plus North Carolina elected officials across the state need to take the no fossil fuel money pledge. That means no money from Duke Energy, Dominion Energy, and others. As 15-year-old Greta Thunberg recently shared at COP24, until you start focusing on what needs to be done rather than what is politically possible, there is no hope. We cannot solve a crisis without treating it as a crisis. We need to keep fossil fuels in the ground, and we need to focus on equity, y'all. And if solutions within this system are so impossible to find, then maybe we should change the system itself. Because of the climate crisis, this EO is a good start, but so much more needs to be done for North Carolina to be a real leader, and I truly hope it will be. Thank you.
Followed by Justin Ballman.
Good morning. My name is Mary Abrams, and excuse me, I'm from Cary, North Carolina. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to join Karen in saying yay for Governor Cooper. I'm very pleased that he's taking this issue seriously and has tasked the Climate Change Interagency Council with developing plans that support a 40% reduction in statewide greenhouse gases by 2025. Thank you, Secretary Regan, for chairing this group, and the other agency secretaries for your leadership in making these climate commitments a reality. Now the hard work really begins. This issue is so important. I know as an Army veteran in 27 years how seriously the DoD takes climate change as a threat and how heavily they're investing in clean energy to make our forces lighter, faster, and less vulnerable here and abroad. I'm also a member of the Wake Audubon Society, a local chapter of the National Audubon Society in Audubon, North Carolina. And according to Audubon, climate change is the #1 long-term threat to birds and the places that they need. The actions that you take will help birds and people while growing the clean energy economy and making our state more resilient to hurricanes and natural disasters. I know that Audubon and many other organizations across the state stand ready to assist you in this important mission. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Justin Ballman, followed by Gail Goldsmith-Tuck.
I'm Justin Bauman. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of North Carolina, and I study the impacts of climate change on coral reefs on a global scale. So I'm here mostly just to pitch that the science community is also here in the room. We're also not in the room, and it's sometimes hard to engage academics, but y'all have said that that's what you want to do, so please keep doing it. Even if they don't respond to your emails, please keep doing it. We're here, we're interested, we want to help. This is a really important issue, and we are here to partner with you. So I want to take a little bit of a time to talk a little bit about the difference between 1 degree of warming, 1.5 degree of warming, and 2 degrees of warming. So for those of you who don't know, coral reefs are in dire need of help. They're facing huge declines on a global scale, and the IPCC has recently released this report that this is not mine. Has recently released a report that states if we limit the warming on a global scale to 1.5 degrees Celsius, that we'll lose only 70 to 90% of our coral reefs. If we don't do that and we limit to 2 degrees of warming, which is roughly where we are with the Paris Agreement, coral reefs as we know it are going to break down. And that might not matter for North Carolina. We don't have coral reefs, but for those of you who have ever seen one, it matters for a lot of people. About 1/3 of the world relies on protein from coral reefs. I guess I'm really emotional about this. And they also rely on that food and on the tourism dollars. And without that, these communities are going to suffer. So we need to think about equity. We need to think about inequality on a global scale. And again, I want to end with saying that the academics in the room and not in the room are here to help. So please give us a call. Thank you.
Followed by Amanda Robertson.
Hi, my name is Gail Goldsmith-Touch. I'm from Forsyth County, North Carolina. I want to thank Governor Cooper, who I know is not here right now, Secretary Regan, the Department of Environmental Quality, and everybody else who organized this event today. It's really important, and I'm glad we're all here. The governor said that leaders here have been working on the issues for decades. I am one of them. I have a master's in environmental science from the 80s. When I first learned about climate change, I have a law degree and I've got a master of environmental law. I've been working on these issues for a long time, and it's time now that we don't just work on them, but that we get the job done. Several years ago, I represented with two other attorneys a minor child petitioning the Environmental Management Commission to regulate carbon pollution. It was denied and appealed. The Superior Court upheld the EMC finding, and now it's back before the Environmental Management Commission with another attorney and some other minor children. Amanda Robertson and I are co-chairs of North Carolina Climate Solutions Coalition. What we're doing with the North Carolina Climate Solutions Coalition is we're working with towns, cities, and counties to resolve to get to 100% clean and renewable energy. 19 towns, cities, and counties have passed these resolutions, and several have enacted plans to get there. We need the support of the state on energy efficiency, renewable energy, transition of transportation, and other complementary initiatives. We absolutely cannot support coal, nor can we support the turning of fossil fuel plants into natural gas plants or natural gas infrastructure. Natural gas is methane gas. It's a powerful greenhouse gas, and it leaks. In addition, I was trying to do that all by myself. Sorry. Anyway, I'm sorry about that. We also can't support biofuels or biomass. We need zero emissions, not additional emissions with offsets. We need the offsets for the current emissions. So this is a nonpartisan issue. I thank you all, and I'm sorry I spoke in a couple extra seconds.
Amanda Robertson, followed by Curry Richmond.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor Cooper, Secretary Regan, Mr. Tarr, agency secretaries, and representatives. My name is Amanda Robertson, and I am co-chair with Gail Touch of North Carolina Climate Solutions Coalition, a North Carolina 501c3 nonprofit corporation. I'm speaking today on behalf of North Carolina Climate Solutions Coalition. The mission of our organization is to identify and implement solutions to avert climate catastrophe. We do this by bringing together diverse climate organizations and people to support, accelerate, and amplify their work. We provide tools to empower local communities and individuals to take urgent action, especially in support of vulnerable and fragile communities, to create green jobs, and to rapidly transition to a 100% clean, sustainable, renewable energy economy. Thus far, we have supported 19 counties, towns, and cities across North Carolina in adopting a 100% clean energy resolution. Last month, Durham County adopted a strong 100% clean energy and green jobs resolution with a goal of reducing 80% of their greenhouse gas emissions in all sectors by 2030 and 100% by 2050. They're now developing a plan to achieve these goals. Earlier this year, the City of Charlotte, through the work of many local citizens, stakeholder groups, and policymakers, adopted a 100% clean energy resolution. And on Monday of this week, the Charlotte City Council voted unanimously to adopt the Strategic Energy Action Plan, called CEAP, a plan developed through the same group of citizen stakeholders and public leaders to transition the city to zero carbon clean energy by 2030 in the public transportation and building sectors. What happened in Charlotte happened because of the involvement of citizens and stakeholder groups in the process. North Carolina Climate Solutions Coalition stands with our governor and all of you in support of these goals and ask that you please let us know if there's anything we can do to help you in this work. Our local communities need the support of the governor's office and the state of North Carolina to accomplish their own ambitious goals. We hope to work together with you in this work. Lastly, the science shows that we cannot reach the goals identified in the governor's executive order if we do not cease immediately development of further fracked gas infrastructure in our state. This includes the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, the expansion of the Mountain Valley Pipeline into our state, and the development of fracked gas plants proposed by Duke Energy to be developed across our state. Thank you.
Mr. Richmond, followed by Dave Burton.
Good morning. My name is Harvey Richmond. I'm a federal retiree who spent 31 years working on developing national air quality standards with the U.S. EPA. I serve as the co-chair of the Conservation Committee, of the Capital Group of the Sierra Club, which represents about 10,000 members and supporters, including Wake County from the Virginia border down through Fayetteville. On behalf of our group, I want to thank the governor for signing the Executive Order 80, which created the Climate Change Interagency Council, and which calls on a number of cabinet agencies to develop several reports and assessments related to limiting climate change and taking steps to mitigate the effects that cannot be avoided. The latest science from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change underscores the need for immediate action to slow climate change. Cities and counties across North Carolina, including Wake County, Orange County, Buncombe County, Charlotte, Asheville, and others, have already adopted 100% clean energy goals of their own. The Sierra Club is working with officials in other cities and towns and counties to adopt similar goals, and we hope that the Council will support these communities and encourage others to join in. Clean, renewable energy also will provide the jobs of the future and can provide North Carolina a competitive advantage into the future. We deeply appreciate the Governor's commitment to meeting the goals set forth in the Paris Agreement and setting clear targets and deadlines to get North Carolina there. We're glad to see a goal set of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2025 across all sectors. We encourage the Council to move fast on clean transportation, a rising source of greenhouse emissions in North Carolina. We need more electric buses, electric charging infrastructure, and electric ports in order to reach the Governor's target. Non-car transportation options such as bike trails and rail also need support. Finally, in order to reach the goals set forth in the executive order, North Carolina will need to move away from fossil fuels such as coal and frack gas. Instead, North Carolina should be investing heavily in energy efficiency and clean energy sources, including solar and on and offshore wind. We recommend that the Council weigh in with the Utilities Commission to oppose the construction of any new gas-fired power plants. Despite Duke Energy repeatedly calling frack gas a clean source of energy, methane that is leaked at the stage from extraction of frack gas in Pennsylvania to transmission through pipelines to end use is 80 to 100 times more damaging to our climate and our lifetimes than carbon dioxide. We recommend the Council consider the impact on climate of any proposed interstate pipelines, including the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, and we look forward to working with the Council in the year ahead. Thank you.
Dave Burton, followed by Kathy Holt.
I'm Dave Burton. I was an IPCC expert reviewer. I published in the academic literature on sea level rise. I was appointed to the North Carolina Sea Level Rise Impact Study Advisory Committee. I'm a member of the CO2 Coalition, a board member and science advisor to NC20, and I created the sealevel.info website, which has the best sea level analysis tools on the internet. The main obstacle to this council doing constructive work is politics. Climate science is so politicized and commercialized that much of what you hear is nonsense. For instance, you've heard that there's a scientific consensus that CO2 emissions help warm the planet, and that's true. But do you realize there's no consensus that it's harmful? In fact, the best evidence is that man-made climate change is benign, and CO2 emissions are beneficial for both mankind and natural ecosystems. I'm one of over 30,000 American scientists who've signed a petition attesting to that fact. CO2 is plant food. Some of you might remember the terrible famines that were often in the news in places like Bangladesh. Famine is one of the great scourges of humanity, the third horseman of the apocalypse. But famines are becoming rare, and one of the reasons is rising CO2 levels, which have increased worldwide agricultural productivity by about 20%. Those benefits are well measured by thousands of agricultural studies. The supposed harms are just hypothetical. Direct impacts of global warming are obviously negligible. We're on track for at most about 1 degree of warming by 2100, probably less. That's like moving about 70 miles south or planning about 1 week later. So folks promoting solar and wind boondoggles hype other supposed harms, like sea level rise or extreme weather or polar bears. But those problems aren't actually happening. CO2 has been rising steadily for 2/3 of a century, yet sea level rise has not accelerated. Hurricanes are not worsening, strong tornadoes have actually declined, and the polar bears are fine. We should not try to reduce carbon emissions, but there are things that we should do. We should play to our strengths. North Carolina State has a top 5 nuclear engineering program, better than Georgia Tech or any California school. We should support that work and encourage development of innovative nuclear power technologies like thorium and molten salt reactors for reliable, affordable, baseload power generation to free the world from its reliance on fossil fuels, which wind and solar can never do. If you have any questions, I'm available after the meeting or call me at any time. I'd like to...
Kathy Holt, followed by Therese Vick.
Hello, my name is Kathy Holt from Asheville and the Western North Carolina Renewables Coalition and Asheville's 350.org. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. Although this executive order outlines worthy goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, I have some concern about budgeting for its implementation. For example, the Department of Environmental Quality is tasked with coming up with a clean energy plan, a risk and resiliency plan, and to assist in the comprehensive conservation program for energy efficiency, as well as to play a role in the North Carolina Climate Change Interagency Council. However, the state legislature cut funding for the DEQ by $1.8 million in fiscal year 2018 to 19. This follows deep cuts to the DEQ in the years from 2009 to 2016, which caused the layoff of nearly 1/3 of the agency's staff. It's clear that the DEQ is already having difficulty meeting its current responsibilities, let alone taking on these additional ones, which it is considered to play a key role. Will it be able to take on these added tasks? Are funds available to hire the extra staff that will be needed? I would like to know that a well-reputed climate action firm will be hired to help develop these plans, and that a consultant for each county will be hired. I'd also like to mention that the order does not mention halting investment in fossil fuel infrastructure. We know that Duke Energy is massively investing in fracked gas infrastructure, the power plants, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, and also there's the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which will lock our state into dependency on this destructive fuel for most electricity generation for another 30 years, and it's unnecessary. Duke could instead invest in renewable energy technology, which is less expensive and protects our air, water, and atmosphere.
Thank you. Therese Vick.
Good morning. I'm Therese Vick with Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League, and I also want to thank Governor Cooper and the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, particularly Governor Cooper, for taking this action. But I wanted to speak just a second on emotion. I watched some of the faces of some of the officials in the room while folks were making some statements, and I saw a little bit of eye rolling. Saw a little bit of grimacing. But you know, there are a lot of impacted landowners and impacted community people in this room who have been living with fossil fuel facilities or are threatened by natural gas infrastructure. And so I think that's one thing that when you go forward with this, you need to think about it from the community lens, because they are the ones who are going to be suffering from climate change, from climate crisis. Another thing I didn't hear anything about was environmental justice. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline is forcing itself through environmental justice communities and farm communities in eastern North Carolina. Governor Cooper and DEQ need to hit pause on that right now, because that will sabotage their efforts to work on climate change. I was lucky enough to get one little second to speak to Governor Cooper today, and I appreciate him stopping to talk to me. That was very gracious of him. But he also needs to talk to these impacted landowners who have been begging to meet with him for almost, going on a year and a half, and he will not meet with them. And there are some of them here today because their properties are the ones that are being destroyed. They are the eastern North Carolina areas where this pipeline is forcing its way through is the ones that have already experienced devastation from flooding and from impacts of climate change. And so he owes them that. And all of you in this room that work for the state government owe them that respect and that consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Regan.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank everyone who express their opinions today. I think there's power in diversity of thought. So thank you for sharing your perspectives. I want to thank everyone who has stayed with us for the entire time in the audience and listened to what we're rolling out. We are very focused on transparency and stakeholder engagement, so this will not be the first engagement, or the last engagement, excuse me. And then I finally want to truly thank my colleagues around the table for dedicating the time and the resources, and all of the staff that support us and make us look good. There's a lot of staff at all of these departments that have participated in the development, not only of this plan, but also putting together today's events. So I want to thank everybody. We have a lot of work to do. I personally think it's exciting and long overdue. So again, thank you. You will be hearing from the rest of us, and if the council members don't have anything else, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.